Hey everyone, this is Cody. I am the Executive Director of the Student Debt Crisis Center. I'm going to give our Borrower Outreach Coordinator, Sabrina, just a minute here to get our slide deck up. But in the meantime, before we get started with the workshop, I want to thank the students who are on the last panel. I always like to discuss this, but when we first started working on this issue years ago, it was so challenging to find young people who were ready and willing and interested in the topic, mostly because they're in school, they've got other issues that are priority. Student debt, their student loan payments haven't really begun. Seeing the work that folks like NextGen and other allies have done to really bring this issue in front of young people and mobilize young people, it's really been, I think, one of the most important and interesting developments in the movement to address student debt. So really exciting to see that. All right, so let's get started. We're going to do one of our student loan help clinics. This is one of the most rewarding work that we do. It's really exciting to be able to help individuals tackle their student loan burden. Historically, we've said that, letting folks address their student debt frees them so they can take action and better fight for reforms. So Sabrina, let's move on to the next slide and we'll do some quick housekeeping before we get started. So today we're going to talk about student loan basics. It really starts with some fundamentals. Many borrowers we speak to don't know about the types of student loans they have. They're really confused. It's a complex system. So we'll start with some fundamentals. We'll work our way up to some important policy updates, changes that have happened just in the last few months. We're going to cover affordable repayment plans. These are critical for people that are struggling to afford their payments, or for people who have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we will also talk about student loan forgiveness programs. They are real, and we want folks to know how they can apply and qualify. At the end, we will talk about an online tool we have to help people understand their options and to enroll in federal repayment programs. And I just always add an important caveat. We are not financial counselors or attorneys. We are here to help, though. We're advocates. We are people who have student loan debt ourselves. So we have a great fundamental understanding of the issue at hand. But there are situations in which a borrower will want to contact an expert attorney or a financial counselor for other types of issues. So I just want to introduce the folks on today's call. As I mentioned, my name is Cody Hunanian. I'm the Executive Director at the Student Debt Crisis Center. We are a nonprofit that centers the voices of student loan borrowers to impact public policy and end the crisis once and for all. And we have about 2 million supporters across the country. So we are really a people-powered movement and a people-powered organization. We should have on today's call, I've got Sabrina Calazans. Sabrina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Calazans. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at Student Debt Crisis Center. I'm a student loan borrower, and I know that this workshop has been very helpful, not only to me, but from other people who have watched it. So thank you for joining us today.
And we also have Lindsay Clark from our partners at Savi. Lindsay, are you on the line?
Yes. Hey, Cody. It's great to be with you all. My name is Lindsay Clark. I'm Director of External Affairs here at Savi. We are a social impact tech startup based in Washington, D.C. That help people navigate the very complicated repayment and forgiveness system. And I'm also joined by my colleague, Ian Kuhn, who's going to talk to you about the free platform that we provide for all of you today on the webinar to be able to hopefully reduce this burden and reach student loan freedom. So thanks for having us, Cody and Sam and everyone at NextGen and Student Debt Crisis Center, and excited to be here.
Thank you, Lindsay. I've worked with Lindsay and Ian on dozens of these workshops, these clinics for student loan borrowers, and I don't know two other people who are willing to put in the work and really help folks understand their situation. So we're always really excited, and it's a privilege to have them here today. As I mentioned, our organization centers the needs and voices of borrowers, and we partner with allies. I just want to also note Student Debt Crisis Center believes that this is a crisis and that we have to act now to address the immediate needs of borrowers. That's exactly why we're here today. We know that you all are facing a personal crisis when it comes to student loan debt, and we feel that step one is helping you all understand your options. For 45 million Americans, student debt means a delay of countless dreams. It stops people from buying houses, starting families, building businesses. This should be the first step for many of us towards financial freedom, and we're really excited to be a part of that. With that, I will pass it to Sabrina, who's going to go over a quick overview of the student loan situation facing Americans and Californians today.
Thanks, Cody. So today, we're looking here at the screen, we're looking at the national spotlight, and we see that the average student debt per person is about $37,172, and about 45 million Americans are burdened with student loan debt. And the total is about $1.7 trillion nationwide for student loan debt. We don't say this to try and scare you, but it's so that you know that you're not alone in this. It's a systemic issue. The system is broken and it's not your personal mistake. This is something that's impacting millions of people and their families. And so we really like to bring that to people's attention, because we hear from borrowers that they have guilt or shame surrounding their student loan debt, and you shouldn't have that. So today's agenda, we'll be talking about understanding your loans, important updates, repaying your loans, federal forgiveness, and more. I think I might have skipped, hold on one second. Sorry about that. So whenever we talk about the crisis, we have to talk about the communities that are disproportionately impacted. And in this case, it's women, communities of color, and low-income communities. So we see here that women hold about 2/3 of the total student debt in the country. We see that older borrowers are the fastest growing group, and that Black women have the most debt per borrower, and that over 70% of recent grads have debt. And when we talk about the domino effect, we hear so many times how borrowers tell us that they cannot save for a down payment on a home. They can't save to invest in a business, and it's impacting people's wealth. So the average 30-year-old borrower has about $8,000 less in wealth because of their student debt. When it comes to home ownership, more than half of first-time home buyers cite student debt as a barrier. And when it comes to financial thin ice, we hear that Black and Latinx people are more prone to unemployment, especially during times of crisis. So especially during COVID, we heard how Black and Latinx workers were most likely to lose their job or to have reduced hours or wages. And so that impacts people's abilities to pay their student loan debt. And so today's agenda, as I mentioned before, we'll be talking about all of these. So in this section, we'll talk about student loan basics, loan servicers, and where you can find some information regarding your loans. So when it comes to federal loans and private loans, there are two very different sets of rules. So we often hear from borrowers, one of the most asked questions is, how do I know if I have federal loans or private loans? So these are some of the answers that we respond with. If you have federal loans, the details can be found at studentaid.gov. Your loans will have fixed interest rates, and there are several different kinds of repayment plans, which we will talk about later today, as well as options for hardship, where you can defer your loan payments. There are loan forgiveness programs such as public service loan forgiveness, which we'll also talk about, and default rehabilitation. When it comes to private loans, it's a little bit more tricky, but you can find your details on credit reports, or you can contact your lender. The interest rates are more variable, and there are no guaranteed repayment plans, hardship deferments, or default rehabilitation. And then of the federal loans, there are three kinds. There are direct loans, and then there are Perkins loans and federal family education loans, known as FFEL loans. Perkins loans and FFEL loans are older kinds of loans. So if you are looking to go to college or you're a recent graduate, those most likely will not be applying to you. And you can find more information regarding all of this information on studentaid.gov. And so loan servicers. A loan servicer is the company assigned to your loan and they handle your payments. So federal servicers are Mohila, Nelnet, Navient, and Great Lakes, and some private servicers. Navient also deals with private loans as well as Sallie Mae, Wells Fargo, SoFi, and Discover. More recently, we've been hearing a lot in the news updates regarding student loan servicers. There's been a lot of confusion and just questions about who's my loan servicer. Borrowers have heard that their loans are being transferred to other servicers, and they're wondering, what does this mean? So recently, 3 federal student loan servicers, Navient, FedLoan, and Granite State, announced that they will be no longer servicing loans in the near future for the Department of Education. So these loans will be transferred over to other servicers. Approximately 16 million student loan borrowers are impacted. So 35% of all student loan borrowers will be getting a new student loan servicer. And FedLoan Servicing is the company that services federal student loans for PSLF. So what to do next? So the best way to keep track of all of this is to make sure that your address and that your contact information is all up to date, so that once you are alerted, so that you can be reached and be alerted when the transfer has taken place and that you have all the necessary information. You also want to make sure that you open mail and email from your new servicer. It's really important for you to read all of the communications that they provide you with, so that you don't miss out on anything really important that applies to you. And make sure that you save copies of your payment history. Having all of this information is a great way to ensure that all of your info is accurate and that the transfer is complete and that there's nothing wrong with your account. And also make sure that you set a reminder so that you can be sure to log into the new servicer's website to verify your information. So again, if you want to look into your federal loans and find them, you can access this website, studentaidgov, to find it. And then you can also speak with the loan servicer company to find more information on your federal loans, as well as finding info in the federal database. With private loans, there may also be questions if you don't find your loans on studentaid.gov. It may be an indication that you have a private loan. If you have a cosigner, that's another indication that you have a private loan. You can also check your credit report and you can contact lenders, servicers, or a debt collector. Now I'm going to toss it back to Cody or Lindsay to take over the next section.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sabrina. You all are going to see one of the trends, I think, of today's clinic that's very different is that there's a lot of updates to share. Lindsay later is going to discuss updates related to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Sabrina, thank you for covering these important updates when it comes to student loan servicing companies. I want to just cover quickly some of the important updates related to COVID-19 relief and its expiration in the coming weeks. So let's go to the next slide here, and I'll give you the basics. So COVID-19 relief for borrowers started in March of 2020, last year. And this was due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what was passed as far as relief is a suspension of payments. So for people who have federally held student loans, your payments are likely on pause. And also interest has been put on pause as well. There's also been other changes related to debt collection efforts, and I'll get into that momentarily. The big thing right now, though, is that payments, the payment relief is set to end on January 31st. And that means that millions of Americans are going to have to resume payments after this expiration. And this is extremely concerning to us. We just released a survey with our partners at Savi that found that 9 out of 10 student loan borrowers are not ready to resume payments. So this is going to be a challenging time, and we'll be working through it, but we need borrowers to know about the suspension of payments and interest ending, because we want people to be able to get back into a better situation as quickly as possible and as smoothly as possible. On the next slide, I'll just quickly cover that there was the additional relief for people who were behind on their payments as well. So payments were paused, interest were paused, And on this next slide, I'll also cover the fact that withholdings for defaulted borrowers, meaning your tax and Social Security could be withheld if you were in default, that has been suspended. Borrowers in default were also facing wage garnishments. That has been suspended. And the collection activities like calls and letters and other types of harassment from debt collectors, all of this has been on pause for many student loan borrowers throughout the pandemic. And all of this is set to expire after January 31st. Unfortunately, COVID relief has not been available to everyone with a student loan. And it has been our goal to try to expand this relief to include every American with a student loan. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to do so. But it's important to know if you have a federal direct loan or any other type of, quote, federally held loan, which means that the Department of Education owns your loan, then you have been receiving COVID-19 relief. You don't have to do anything. This relief has been automatic. So if you've been receiving it, you have the right type of loan. And if you haven't received relief, you almost certainly just don't have the right kind of loan. There are other types of federal loans. One of them, for example, is called a Federal Family Education Loan or an FFEL loan. Another type is called a Perkins loan. Some of these federal loans are commercially held, which means a private bank or a lender owns the loan. These people have not received full relief. Up until recently, they didn't receive any relief at all. And defaulted loans that are FFEL loans have now actually had interest and debt collections paused. So some of this relief has been expanded, not all of it. So these people that have FFEL loans and Perkins loans are going to still be having made payments since March. And unfortunately, private loans across the table have not received any of this federal relief. If you have a private loan, I hear you. We talk to borrowers every single day. We're extremely frustrated that private student loan borrowers don't receive nearly any of the types of benefits that federal loans do. Now I'm just going to lay out this timeline because I just want folks to understand what's been going on. It has been quite confusing and there have been a lot of changes. So as I mentioned, COVID relief for federal student loans started in March of last year. It was set to expire in January, but it was extended to September. At that point, President Biden extended this once more through January. And now we're seeing that payments are set to resume on February 1st, 2022. So we are really approaching this deadline very quickly, and we need borrowers to know what's going to happen in the coming months. There are some other recent updates. I don't have time to get into the details, but each one of these is important. There are people who have been applying for a program called Borrower Defense to Repayment. That's for people who have been defrauded. The process for accessing that relief has been improved. Again, FFEL loans that were in default have now had some relief during the pandemic. Borrowers with disabilities are eligible for student loan discharge. That is now available in a more streamlined process. And as we mentioned, the payment pause extension was extended through February 1, 2022. If you have one of these private loans, my advice is to you is you can still check to see if your private lender is offering any relief on their own. Some companies have decided to create their own programs for distressed borrowers. You should contact your lender directly and speak with them because it will change. Your options will vary depending on what company services or is your lender. All right, so we got the updates out of the way. That is important information, but for many borrowers, they're going to really need to know about repaying their federal student loans because, as I mentioned, on February 1st, we're all going to be repaying our student loans all over again. So we're going to talk about the standard repayment plan. We're going to talk about affordable options. We call them income-driven repayment plans. And I'm going to give you a little bit of tips when it comes to what to do if you fall into default. So when a borrower gets a student loan for the first time, and they're set to resume payments, there is a standard option, and that is called the 10-year standard repayment plan. A borrower in this plan is expected to make the same monthly payment every month for 10 years. At the end of that, your student loans are paid off. I wish I could say that most of us will pay off our loans with no problem in 10 years. Unfortunately, that is not the case for most of us on today's call. For those people, there are more affordable options for borrowers who are struggling. Those options are called income-driven repayment. Income-driven repayment makes your monthly payments more affordable because it calculates your monthly payment based on a percentage of your income and your family size. So no longer matters how much student loan debt you have. What matters is how much money you make and how large your family is, and it adjusts your monthly payments to a rate that hopefully will be more affordable and more manageable based on your situation. IDR programs are really helpful for a lot of types of borrowers. There are some borrowers who just have consistently low incomes, and that is not for lack of hard work or career choices. I hear often from social workers who are doing incredible work in childhood development and mental health fields and are just perpetually underpaid for their incredible service. A borrower like that who just for a long period of time cannot afford their monthly payments would benefit from an IDR program. If you've lost your job or have had decreased hours and income due to the COVID-19 pandemic, one of these programs is great for you. And you can lock in a lower payment right now for the next year by enrolling in an IDR program before payments even begin in February. So if you have a lower payment right now, you can contact your loan servicer, contact the Department of Education. You can enroll in one of these programs and just lock in a lower monthly payment for the next year. And even people who've been excluded from COVID-19 relief, so these people that had the wrong type of student loan, they haven't received any relief during the pandemic. If you have one of these other federal loans, you can still enroll in a lower monthly payment through an IDR plan. Now, here's all the federal income-driven repayment plans. I wish we could get into the details of each one of these because there's different qualifying factors, but it's a bit nuanced and it would just take forever. For you, all you need to know is that there are multiple options. On the left here, we have revised pay-as-you-earn, which is the most generous option when it comes to how much your monthly payments are and how long you can be in the program for. And on the right, we have income contingent repayment, or what we call ICR. This is the oldest of the programs. Your monthly payments would be higher and you would be in the program for longer. What matters as far as qualifying for these programs is what type of loan you have and when you got your student loan. I can't get into the details today because it gets quite complicated. So you can go to studentaid.gov, which is the Department of Education's website, and you can learn about each one of these programs and learn how it applies to your personal situation. I show here a repayment example because I think it's hard to understand how these programs work without actually seeing it in action. So this is a borrower who's single, they have one child, and they have student debt that's over $37,000. In a 10-year standard repayment plan, this person would be paying $364 a month. In an income-driven repayment plan, this person could pay as little as $0 per month if they had $0 in income. If they had $25,000 in income per year, they would pay as little as $49. And you can see even at $75,000 in income, a borrower still sees some savings, which can really mean the difference between affording rent, putting food on the table, and supporting your family. So these programs are incredibly powerful. So there are some steps to enrolling in these programs. You have to submit an application. The application is available online at the Department of Education, or you can contact your student loan servicing company. After you do so, you'll be put into a repayment plan, typically within about 30 days. And this is the important part. After you enroll and are put in the plan, you have to recertify your income every 12 months if you want to stay in the program. So we always tell folks, put it on your calendar, maybe 11 months from now, so you don't miss your deadline. And what you'll do is you'll just share what your most recent yearly income was, and your payments will be adjusted accordingly. If you fail to meet your deadline, it's okay. You can still get back in the program. But what will happen is your monthly payment for the month will go back to normal, which will be higher typically. You will see your interest capitalized, which means your balance on your loan account increases. So there are some consequences, but it's not the end of the world. If you need to get back into the program, you still can. Whenever we talk about the federal programs, there's another side to it we have to cover, which is letting folks know that there are scams out there. So there are people who send out letters, they email, they do social media blasts. I get phone calls all the time. And the scam typically involves someone urging a borrower to consolidate their loans, apply for loan forgiveness, or frankly, the company promises something that's just too good to be true. You'll often hear them say, immediate loan forgiveness here, there's a deadline approaching. They'll use all these really urgent terms to try to push people into programs. At the end of the day, these companies typically charge you tons of money to do what you could do for free yourself at the Department of Education's website. So we put this here because we want people to be aware, and so that they can empower themselves to take action for free, as opposed to falling into one of these debt relief scams. Many people who fall for these scams or have been taken advantage of by their student loan servicer want to take action. You can do so by submitting a complaint at what we call the Department of Education's Student Loan Ombudsman's office. The current ombudsman is Bonnie Luttrell. She was actually on the summit earlier today talking about these recent updates. She's a former advocate, someone who really wants to see the best outcomes for student loan borrowers. So you can reach out to the Ombudsman's group, and they will actually help you take action and resolve issues that you have on your account. And lastly, student loan default. This is a whole nother area. A student loan default is when someone is over 270 days past due on their account. When someone falls into student loan default, what that can mean is that you have huge fees added to your account. It means you can't get financial aid anymore. It can even prevent you from getting certain jobs. So student loan default is really a big deal, but for someone who falls into default, there are ways to get out of it. So there is a program, it's called Loan Default Rehabilitation. It's offered through the Department of Education. It's one of these benefits that's offered to a federal student loan. And so there are options. If you are a borrower in default, I encourage you to go to the Department of Education's website and learn more. This particular program, also a bit complicated, so we don't have time to get into the details today, but just know you have rights, you have options, and you can get back into a good place when it comes to your student loan accounts. You can skip right over this, Sabrina. All right, so we've covered the important stuff. In my opinion, income-driven repayment programs are the most effective tool that a borrower has to make their student loan payments more affordable. There are other options that the government offers. We have options like extended repayment, which extends the length of your repayment schedule and lowers your monthly payment. We have graduated repayment, which starts your monthly payments off low and increases them over time. We have a combination of the two called extended graduated repayment. And then there are some other familiar terms like forbearance and deferment, which are pauses on your account, and consolidation, which can combine your accounts and provide some minor benefits. All of these exist. I want you to know about them. We're not covering them today because they're not as powerful or as effective as the income-driven repayment plans are. So here's your checklist. If you want to learn about repayment plans that work best for you, we certainly encourage you to empower yourself. When folks know their rights and their options, they will do better at picking the choices that are best for them. You can learn about it at studentaid.gov. Checklist number 2, submit your IDR application. Do it online if you can. It should take no longer than 10 or 15 minutes. So you can do it yourself. And number 3, recertify your income next year. don't forget, put it on your calendar, mark it so you don't miss your deadline. And I'm just going to flag here. We're going to talk about it later, but you can also use the tool that our partners at Savi created, because that tool helps streamline the application process, makes it easier, and also makes sure that folks can monitor their accounts so they don't miss their deadlines, fall through the cracks, and have any other errors that happen throughout the application process. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that later, but that's also an option if you want to enroll in one of these programs. So here's a quick FAQ. Someone asked, what should I do if my income or family size changes before the recertification deadline? The good news is you can actually change your income and lower your monthly payments at any time. So borrowers that have lost their job during the pandemic could recertify their income right then and there and lower their monthly payment. That can happen at any time during your repayment journey. Folks often ask us, if I have my debt forgiven at the end of one of these programs, will I have to pay taxes? That may be the case. If you complete an income-driven repayment program, which takes 20 or 25 years, there could be a tax implication. We're just now seeing folks receive student loan forgiveness by completing these programs for the first time over the last few years. So this is still kind of an open-ended question, but as the law is written, you may pay taxes on it. And another person asked, what other documentation can I submit for my income? We get this question all the time. If you have alternate documentation, such as like a pay stub or some other proof of income, it can be used to help lower your monthly payment. So we definitely hear from folks that have unique employment situations where it's less simple. They're proving their income's less simple. So there are other ways to lower your monthly payments, and we can always work with you to help you understand that. Cool. Well, before we go on to any of the other sections, maybe now's a good time to just take a quick moment and address some of the questions that have already come in. And I already see a few great ones here. Maria was asking, is there any opportunity to have their student loans forgiven if you've been paying your student loans for a long time? We get this question all the time from older borrowers and retirees. Lindsay, if you're on, do you want to talk about if there are any options for folks, kind of like a statute of limitations when it comes to federal student loans?
Sure. Thanks, Cody. So there are a couple different ways to have your loans forgiven. And I'm actually about to talk in the next section about a program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness, which forgives the entirety of your loan balance after you've essentially worked in public service for 10 years. But let's say you aren't a public servant, perhaps. You are also able to have your loans forgiven on an income-driven repayment plan after you've been making those payments for the allotted time, usually 20 or 25 years. Your loans can then be forgiven after you've made payments for those 20 to 25 years. However, that forgiveness is considered taxable income. So what many people refer to as sort of a tax bomb that could be waiting for you after making those payments. So that's sort of the two biggest ways I would say are income-driven repayment or a big program like public service loan forgiveness. There are also a lot of other state-based and occupation-based forgiveness programs, probably hundreds out there. And so we're happy to help if you're curious and learning more. Reach out to Cody or myself. We're happy to help you explore those. But I would say those are sort of probably the biggest ways of pursuing forgiveness.
Great. I want to take a moment to answer Carmen's question or address her statement here. Carmen says it's unfair that the IDR program does not look at rent and other expenses, especially when you live in California. Carmen, I hear you 1000%. We talk about these income-driven repayment plans because they're often the best choice for borrowers who need to lower their monthly payment, but the programs are not perfect by any means. And so we hear from people in expensive states like California, New York, and Florida, Texas, some of these places where it can cost a lot to live in certain areas. And because it costs a lot to live in certain areas, it also means that their income is typically generally higher. That doesn't mean that they have a more, stable financial situation because the cost of living is so high. So what happens for many of these borrowers is their income increases, the IDR program expects them to pay more into the program, but all of these extra costs because of the living situation really makes the program like ineffective for these borrowers. It's a real problem. Also, you addressed it. The program does not consider other expenses. So we hear from a lot of borrowers who are facing, huge healthcare challenges or other expenses that are really taking up a huge chunk of their income, and it's not included in their calculation. All of these things are opportunities for advocacy. They're issues that we bring up in front of lawmakers and policymakers all the time. And when it comes to hopefully fixing these programs, these are things we should consider to improve them and strengthen the programs moving forward. All right, I'm gonna take one more question in this segment, and then I want to give Lindsay time to talk about these other programs. We'll try to answer some more questions at the end as well. A question from Jerry was about loan consolidation. I didn't get to go into the details here, but Jerry asks, where can I find help consolidating my student loans? And Jerry also adds that they don't know which loans that they should include or not include. Lindsay, I know that's a tough question, but maybe you could just give some general guidance as far as like what loan consolidation is for and the pros and cons of doing so.
Sure, that's a great question. And whenever someone brings up consolidation, I always get a little bit nervous because it is something that is complicated and it can have sort of irreversible consequences when consolidating. So there are a few different reasons why you'd want to consolidate. First, if you have an older loan type like a FFEL loan that is ineligible for, let's say, a program like public service loan forgiveness, you would need to consolidate that loan in order to become eligible and start accumulating eligible credits. Another reason why you might consolidate is to get out of default. It's sort of a get out of jail free card. It will immediately bring your loans out of default without having to go through a 9-month rehabilitation process. The thing about consolidation is you can only do it once. So for something like default, if you've consolidated already, you can't use that again. Here's what I would say, and we are happy to help you with our expert support team here at Savi because it is something that's complicated. Sometimes you might only want to consolidate some of your loans and not all of them because it could reset your accounts towards IDR or public service loan forgiveness. So I would highly recommend talking with an expert, and we're going to put our support contact information in the chat before the end of the session, and you can reach out to us and we'll be able to work with you more closely because I would say it is something you're going to want to have that conversation, and we can definitely help you with that.
Great. Well, keep the questions coming, guys. We want to address as many as we can while we're here. But with that, I will pass it to Lindsay and let her or Ian, the team at Savi, and let them jump into loan forgiveness programs.
Great. Thanks, Cody. So I'm going to walk through one of the biggest loan forgiveness programs out there called public service loan forgiveness, talk about sort of the general application process, eligibility requirements, how to get started, and discuss some of the recent policy updates and expansion to the program that hopefully make more borrowers eligible to be able to benefit from this forgiveness. Then we're going to talk about some additional sort of forgiveness programs that are out there before I pass it over to my colleague Ian, who's going to talk to you about the free Savi platform that you'll be able to use to help you with anything like public service loan forgiveness. So to recap on this next slide about public service loan forgiveness, essentially it is full forgiveness on the remainder of your loan balance, whatever that may be, $10,000, $500,000, it doesn't matter, after you have made 120 qualifying payments. And I say that in air quotes because the devil's really in the details here as far as what constitutes a qualifying payment. And we're going to go into that in more detail in a little bit. But essentially, that's why people say 10 years. But the important thing to remember is that these 120 payments do not need to be consecutive. They just need to be cumulative. I'll repeat that. They don't need to be consecutive. They just need to be cumulative. So let's say you worked for a couple of years in the public sector, maybe gained 50 credits towards the 120 you need. And then maybe you had to take a year off from work or you went into the private sector. Nothing happens to those credits. They just pause. And then let's say you resume your eligibility in the future, you can resume continuing to accumulate credits. All right, so you just need to reach 120 total. So sometimes that 10 years, it often takes borrowers perhaps longer. But after you do make those 120 payments, all of your debt can be forgiven tax-free. So there are no tax implications associated with this program. So on this next slide, one of the ways to really sort of maximize your benefits around public service loan forgiveness is by minimizing your monthly payment, hopefully on something like an income-driven repayment plan, while maximizing your ultimate forgiveness through public service loan forgiveness. So that's really how we try to help borrowers to maximize their benefit here, keeping that monthly payment as low as possible, like on an income-driven repayment plan, and hopefully you can get as much forgiven after those 10 years worth of payments. So let's dig into sort of the details a little bit more here. So this is sort of a basics overview around public service loan forgiveness. Some questions you can ask yourself to determine, do I qualify for this program? So first and foremost, are you paying back a federal direct loan? Okay, that's one. It's important to know your loan type when thinking about public service loan forgiveness. Next, you want to think about, does your employer qualify? Okay, and we're going to talk about which employers qualify and which don't in a second. Are you enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan? These are sort of the three questions: your loan type, your employment, and your repayment plan. All right, those are sort of the three things you want to think about when it comes to making qualifying payments. After that, as far as actually applying and sort of enrolling in this program, you're going to want to submit documentation. And it doesn't have to be after the 10 years. Actually, I would encourage borrowers to submit it within your first year of working in public service, if possible. It's what's called a public service loan forgiveness employment certification form. It's actually the same form that is the application. This is the one and only form that you'll need to submit for public service loan forgiveness. It's not required to submit every year, but it's highly encouraged by the Department of Education that borrowers submit this every year or when they change employers to basically certify the past 12 months worth of credits. So that's certifying that you worked for a qualifying employer, you made payments during that time. Great, that's 12 credits. 12 credits towards that 120. You're sort of inching 12 credits over 12 credits, right, until you reach the 120. And that's when you'll submit your final employment certification form. And that's essentially how you get forgiveness. All right. So about 5 or 6 weeks ago, there was a huge overhaul to the public service loan forgiveness program. And this has been sort of long awaited and came, to not, I would say pleasant surprise, but we were really excited to be able to hear this news and share with a lot of borrowers. So the promise of the public service loan forgiveness program was that if you make payments for 10 years, you can have your loans forgiven if you're a public servant. What we found is that so many borrowers were either rejected because of one technicality or another, their loan type, their repayment plan. And so the promise really didn't live up to itself. And so hopefully these overhauls are a step in the right direction to try to do just that. So the Department of Ed announced what they're calling a PSLF waiver for a limited period of time from now until next October 31st, 2022. In which they are expanding the eligibility requirements around public service loan forgiveness. I'm going to go into more detail on that in a second. They're also going to be reviewing previously denied public service loan forgiveness applications. So if you've been previously denied from this program, now is your opportunity to have that reviewed. They're also going to be automatically providing PSLF credits for military service members and federal employees using federal data matches. So this is a great step in the right direction. On this next slide, I'm going to sort of go through what does qualify for PSLF as far as loans, employer, and repayment plans. So loans, we've got all of the direct loan types: direct subsidized, unsubsidized, doesn't matter, direct grad plus, direct parent plus, and direct consolidated loans. As far as employers go, all levels of government, federal, state, local, or tribal, any 501c3 non-for-profit, and some other critical public service areas. Lastly, as far as repayment plan, any type of standard repayment plan or income-driven repayment plan. Now on this next slide, previously what did not qualify were these older type of loans. All right, so I'm going to talk sort of through here what used to not qualify before this overhaul and now does qualify. So previously, if you had a FFEL loan, FFEL loan, Federal Family Education Loan, Perkins loans, those loans, payments made on those loans did not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Now they are eligible to qualify during this waiver period. Previously that did not qualify, loans in default and private student loans, those still do not qualify. Employer, government contractors, labor unions, 501c4, and religious instruction, again, still do not qualify for this program. Repayment plans now do qualify. This slide's a bit confusing, sorry guys. Extended repayment, graduated, extended graduated, and deferment, forbearance, and default. These all now do qualify. So I'll sort of recap this here. Basically, if you've made 120 payments, okay, on your loans, regardless of your loan type, as long as it's not private, regardless of your loan type, if you made 120 payments, regardless of your repayment plan, you're eligible probably for immediate forgiveness. Let's say you haven't made 120 payments. That's fine. You could still be eligible to take advantage of this waiver. Again, if you've made payments when you had an older loan type or you were on a different repayment plan, those can all count now. So I know it's a bit confusing. The program was confusing to begin with, but we're going to show you how the Savi tool in a little bit can help you to sort of walk through some of those things. So on these next slides, I'm kind of just going to run through what you should be doing next steps wise as far as thinking about your own situation and your eligibility. So I'm going to run through a couple different of these scenarios. So the first thing you want to do is determine what type of loan you have. You can do this by going to studentaid.gov. You can click the My Aid section of that page, scroll down to see your loan breakdown. You're going to find a list of all the federal loans that you have, even if it's been consolidated. If you see words direct or a loan that begins with the word direct, that means you've got a direct loan. If it says FFEL, it means you've got a FEL loan. Perkins, you get the gist here. So that's a way to determine what type of loan you have, which is going to sort of determine what actions you'd need to take next. On this next slide, so let's say you have at least one federal loan and it's not direct, okay? It is a FEL or a Perkins loan. What you're going to need to do is consolidate that loan. You're going to need to submit that consolidation application before October 31st of next year. And then you're going to need to submit an employment certification form. All right, so that's sort of how you get this process started. You can check your employer's eligibility by going to studentaid.gov/PSLF. You can also use the Savi tool that we're going to talk about in a second. On this next slide, let's say you have direct loans and some employment certified. You likely have Fed loan as your servicer already if you've done this, if you've certified your employment. If you already have direct loans and you've certified some of your employment, then you should be awarded automatically any additional payments that you might have been eligible for. So Fed loans should have been contacting you, or you might have received something from FSA, Federal Student Aid. You're going to want to look out for an email about these additional payments counting. So make sure your contact information is up to date, but otherwise you shouldn't need to take any other action. Let's say you have direct loans, okay, but you haven't submitted anything. You haven't applied for anything. Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is submit this employment certification form, okay? That's basically going to get the process started in certifying that you indeed worked for a qualifying employer during the time that you were making payments. Again, you can do this through the tool at studentaid.gov/PSLF. I would sort of a word of warning here, because the Department of Ed is anticipating a large influx of applicants due to this big announcement, you might see some delays in processing. So be patient, but you're going to want to monitor that. And anything that sort of, I would say, goes past a month, you might want to escalate through the Ombudsman, or we're happy to help you here at Student Debt Crisis and Savi. Again, you must submit those by October 31st of next year in order to have any potential retroactive payments counted. Okay, let's say you tried to certify your employment at one point, but were denied or rejected. You are able to resubmit that, and we highly encourage that you do, to potentially have it re-reviewed and receive credit towards forgiveness. Again, you can find which employers are eligible through the Department of Education tool, the PSLF help tool. And again, the eligibility did not change for employer types. All right, so it's still got to be a government organization at any level or a non-for-profit 501c3. So that didn't change through this waiver. It's just around loan type and repayment plan. But again, if you had any issues, please feel free to reach out to us. All right, just really briefly on teacher loan forgiveness, because I know we're running short on time here. Teacher loan forgiveness is another type of forgiveness program for highly qualified teachers working in a Title I school district for school. You are either eligible for a minimum of $5,000 or maximum of $17,500 if you teach 5 consecutive years full-time in a Title I or low-income school or education agency. There are different sort of qualifications, as you can see here. So basically, if you're full-time teaching elementary or secondary, you get a minimum of $5,000. If you teach STEM or special education, you get $17,500. So we're happy to provide more information on teacher loan forgiveness for anyone who might be interested, but that's 5 consecutive years. Last but not least, just want to touch on some other types of forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge. So I'm not going to go into detail on these, but here are a few of the other programs that are out there. And if you want more information about any, feel free to let us know in the chat. So there's total and permanent disability discharge for borrowers who are disabled and are able to receive full forgiveness on their loans, closed school discharged, defense to repayment, false certification of eligibility, death discharged. If you die, your loans are forgiven. That sounds morbid, but it's true. And unpaid refund. So these are just a couple of different types of forgiveness and cancellation that are out there and available to federal student loan borrowers. All right, so to wrap things up here before I turn it over to Ian, just a quick checklist of what you would need to know around forgiveness here. So first and foremost, you want to confirm your loan type, that you have a qualifying loan. Then you're going to want to make sure you're enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan. Again, those have expanded over the past year. You're going to want to verify your employer qualification by submitting that employment certification form. And then you're going to want to continue working full-time up until those 120 payments. So for more information, we're going to drop this link in the chat, but we can show you how to use our tool to be able to determine all of this. And we actually help you with all the paperwork so that you don't have to do it on your own, which is great because I know how complicated and burdensome this can be. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ian, who is going to talk to you about an absolutely free tool that you are all able to use, brought to you by Savi, to help navigate repayment as well as programs like public service loan forgiveness. Ian, do we have you?
Yes, thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
I know we have just a couple minutes left, so I will try to be quick, so we have time for questions as well at the end as needed. But like Lindsay said, Savi is a company and an online tool. Here working with all the advocates at Student Debt Crisis and Next Gen Policy today. So we are based in DC and have an online service that goes through and checks all of these qualifications, all these rules, all these regulations for you digitally, 100% free. You don't fix your car by yourself when it has issues. You don't do your taxes by yourself when the IRS calls, and your student loans, they've got to be so complex. It's the same way. So that is what we are here to help with. If we go to the next slide, just a little bit more about us as an organization, since you may not be as familiar with our company. We are a public benefit company, which in short means that we exist to help the public good. Our work together here is founded by grants and also our just public advocacy arm of our organization. So that is, why it's no cost to you. I know that's a question that comes up a lot. But in short, like I said, we're an online tool and a whole team of student loan experts. We were founded by student loan experts that came from the same policy and advocacy space, working on the Obama campaign, founding nonprofits, testifying to Congress, meetings with the White House, everything of that jazz. And that's how they got to know so deeply, right, all of the intricate issues and problems with student loan debt. And policies really need to be passed, to make things better, make things change for borrowers, but they can take a long time. So in the interim, we kind of switched focuses about 5 years ago and made the online tool you see here. So everything that Lindsay and Cody and Sabrina and team ran through of all these confusing rules, it will let you know what you're eligible for, what you're not, what your next steps are that you need to take. So if you're looking to take advantage of this public service loan forgiveness time period, it'll tell you what you need to do there in terms of consolidating or submitting new paperwork. We then help you submit that paperwork all digitally for you. Again, think like an online tax software that takes care of all of that heavy lifting for you. Every year there's paperwork, like they've noted, that you need to do to stay enrolled in this program. Every year we make sure that you're at an eligible nonprofit or that your income is the same, to keep those reduced monthly payments, keep them affordable and adjusted to your current life. We help with that all for free in filing those forms. And additionally, being here in DC, we're always able to also monitor for new policy changes. When the payment pause, has been extended multiple times, anyone that had a Savi account knew that information within the hour. I still to this day have not received a letter from FedLoan for my servicer about that change. So just one example there for you as well. But if we keep going here, I think we have just some examples of what the tool looks like. So there's no surprises if you choose to get started in going with that. We will put the link in the chat here for this, so you can bookmark it and come back to it to make your account. But it is app.bysavvy.com/register/borrowers. And like I said, this is a 100% free service, paid for by grants and our public good foundation here working together. It's an account that will always be yours, will always be free and available as part of attending this event today. So once you get signed up, just some of those couple of quick steps, we're going to go ahead and hit continue application. At this point, it will walk you through a kind of questionnaire that looks, maybe similar, like I said, to other online banking or tax form systems that you've used before. Everything that we asked you questions about is designed to save you more money. So questions like how many dependents you have, for example, saves you $50 per month on your income-driven repayment plan per dependent. So there's all sorts of kind of little, I don't want to say loopholes, but little tricks and tidbits in these programs that we help you uncover to be able to find savings. Most people that work with Savi in Student Debt Crisis together save, I want to say, about $300 per month on their income-driven repayment plan, which, really doing that on your own, your servicer was making you pay more for when you did not need to. So that is kind of the cost of bad servicing and being forced to trust those federal servicers. If we keep going here, I think there's just some more examples. Yeah, again, you see a live estimate through the whole step here. So in this example, we've gotten that monthly payment down to $177 a month, which is a little bit more affordable than where it started. Going through the next screens, you'll put in your income, where you work, some other simple questions, knowing if you're eligible for forgiveness or not, and then we will sync our loans. So that's the very cool part of the tool. It draws a secure, safe connection between your loan servicer. So FedLoan, Navient, and all those other names that Sabrina ran through. It draws a safe connection so we can see, how many payments you've made, what the interest rate is. Has FedLoan been doing their job correctly? All of those details are what we get kind of that front row insight to, and can tell you on this last slide what the best next steps are for you. If you should enroll in a certain plan, if you are eligible for forgiveness, whatever that may be for your unique student loan system. We search 150 different plan options locally and federally for you to find the best one. Going ahead and hitting select and submit. You're welcome to do that and keep rolling. That'll help you file the paperwork and get set up for your best next step. Otherwise, you're always welcome to hit contact support. They are through the whole tool as you need, whether that's sending a message, checking out the help center, sending them an email, etc. Those are always resources you have available to you that way. All right, I know we're just at time here, so happy to take any questions or toss that back over to you, Sam, to help coordinate.
Thank you, Ian, and thanks everyone at Savi and Student Debt Crisis. Just jumping in here real quick, this is the official end time, unfortunately, for the Student Debt Summit. But for those of you, who are in the Zoom webinar with us right now, we will continue answering your questions. So don't go anywhere if you can stay on. But for everyone else who needs to jump off, Thank you so much for joining all of us today. Thank you to everyone for tuning into our Free My Future Student Debt Summit, the 3rd annual this year. And for those who registered, please keep a lookout in your inbox for links to the summit videos and resources. Everyone is able to access these the summit videos as well at our YouTube channel. That's Next Gen Policy on YouTube. You can visit our website as well at nextgenpolicy.org/freemyfuture. And as always, find us on Twitter and Facebook for updates on student loans and the latest advocacy actions that you can take. So thank you again. Free My Future 2021 is a great success to you all. Thanks to you all. So thanks everyone again. But we will be sticking around for everyone else still on the webinar to take questions. So Cody, I will kick it back to you.
Thank you, Sam. And yeah, before we jump into questions, I do want to also say that the event has been incredible. It's been 2 days of bringing experts and lawmakers and advocates together. We've had people at some of the highest levels of policymaking talk about what's being done to address the problem. It's really been an incredible week of discussion. So thank you so much for that. All right, there are a couple of questions. We've done a good job of staying on track, but I see another question related to public service loan forgiveness. The question is, what should a borrower do, or what can a borrower do if they've applied for public service loan forgiveness and been denied, even though they are working for a nonprofit?
Yeah, Cody, happy to take this one. So if you've been denied, even though you've been working for a nonprofit, it could be because under the old eligibility rules, you either didn't have the right loan type or you weren't on the right type of repayment plan. So I would suggest reapplying. By that, I mean submitting an employment certification form, and you'll be able to hopefully have that reevaluated. That's going to probably be the best first step for you to take.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of reasons why a borrower could be denied. Some of them are obvious, others are not. So it seems unreasonable, but for some borrowers, you're gonna have to apply multiple times, and we're gonna have to work together to check off any of the issues. So thank you for that, Lindsay. I see a question here. One of the borrowers wants to know how long does a borrower have to be able to take advantage of the new PSLF waiver?
Sure. So you have until next October 31st, 2022. So I would, given how long sometimes these things can take to process, I would highly encourage you to submit any of this stuff as soon as possible. That way they can have the appropriate amount of time to review and process. It could take weeks, it could take a couple months. So that would be my best bet. But the waiver lasts until next October 31st, 2022.
I've got another question. I want to address this one because I actually was just working on this issue the other day. A borrower was asking if 501c4 organizations qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So right now, a 501c4, which is a political nonprofit, meaning they do kind of electoral work, does not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. But that is actually something that's being worked on as we speak. There was a wonky process of the Department of Education in which public comment is taken and rules will be crafted moving into the future. And one of the proposals being discussed there is expanding public service loan forgiveness to include types of nonprofit workers that aren't currently included. So right now, the answer is no. A 501c4, which is a nonprofit that does political work, instead of a 501c3, which is a charity. The 501c4s currently do not qualify, but that could change in the near future. Melissa was asking if you are interested in public service loan forgiveness, does the last year of not making payments due to COVID-19 relief qualify towards the 120 monthly payments needed to get public service loan forgiveness?
Yep, Cody, I can take this one. So great news here. Yes. And it's actually going to be more than a year. It's going to be about 23 months in total by the time we go back into repayment by February. So that's 23 months in which that payment pause can count as 23 credits towards the 120 you need. So that's going to put you about a fifth of the way closer to forgiveness, 2 years out of maybe like the 10 years that you need. So this is great news for borrowers.
Sundar was asking, what do we mean exactly by 10 years of payments for the public service loan forgiveness program? So maybe it's worth clarifying, like, what do we mean by these timelines and what does the process look like?
Sure. So you need to basically, people say 10 years, but really I would think of it about as 120 payments total. So remember, those payments don't need to be consecutive. They just need to be cumulative. So if you've been paying your loans, let's say well, I'll put it this way. Let's say you've been working public service for 5 years, okay, at a hospital, you're a nurse at a hospital. But you've only made about 20 payments during that time, because let's say you were on a deferment or forbearance for a while, or maybe you weren't making payments, you would only get credits for the months in which you made payments. So you can only get one payment per month, one payment, 1 month, one credit. So that's what we mean by 10 years, right? If you make, 12 months worth of payments, you get 120 credits total after 10 years, right? So at least 10 years worth of payments, but it's 120 total. So hopefully that clarifies that.
I'm going to address this question from Robin. Robin asks, can a traveling nurse qualify for public service loan forgiveness? So Robin, what really matters for borrowers, less about what job they have and more about who their employer is. So if your employer is a nonprofit, 501c3, or a government entity, then you could qualify. So there are many nurses who work for nonprofit hospitals. There are many nurses who work for the county or other government agencies. Those people would qualify for public service loan forgiveness. In fact, you could very well be working in the janitorial staff at a hospital, and as long as your employer is one of these qualifying non-public service employers, then you would qualify for the program. So it's really more about your employer than it is about the specific work that you do. Another borrower asked anonymously, when you're making progress towards an income-driven repayment program or public service loan forgiveness, does the time have to be consecutive? I'll answer that. So no, it doesn't. A borrower interested in public service loan forgiveness can actually combine time. So there's many people who work in nonprofits. Maybe they leave to go work in the private sector for a short period, and then they come back. A borrower in that situation could pick up right where they left off. So it's cumulative, not consecutive. Another question here, does a school district or private school qualify for public service loan forgiveness?
Yeah, a public school does, because that's a government entity. As far as private and charter schools, I think it's going to depend on the school. If it's a not-for-profit 501c3, I'm not sure if its exact status, then it would. You can find that out by looking on the IRS website, going to the PSLF help tool at studentaid.gov/PSLF, or in the Savi tool, we also have a database of all of the qualifying employers.
Great. I've got just, I think, one more here, which is great. We always get this question. A borrower wants to know, do these programs, including the IDR programs and public service loan forgiveness, are those offered to parents who have student loans either for themselves or, I think in this case, a parent who has a student loan to help pay for their child's education?
Sure, I'm happy to answer this one, Cody. So if you are a parent with a loan for your child, so this is what's called a parent plus loan, a loan taken out by a parent on behalf of a child, but in the parent's name, you are potentially eligible for some of these programs, but you need to consolidate that loan. So in order to even become eligible for an income-driven repayment plan or public service loan forgiveness, you would need to consolidate that loan. Once consolidated, The Parent Plus loan is only eligible for one type of income-driven repayment plan, what's called income contingent repayment, or ICR. And then after consolidated as well, it can become eligible for public service loan forgiveness. You can accumulate credits towards that 120. It's based on the parent's employment and the parent's payments. It has nothing to do with your child. So it's in your name as the parent. It's based on your information. So the first step to being able to qualify for programs like that, again, is consolidation.
Great. I think that covers the questions today. I just want to thank, oh, one more popped up. Let's address this one and then we can wrap it up. And Sundar, definitely please feel free to reach out to either of our organizations. We can help address many more questions whenever you have them. This was a question about retroactive applications. So if you worked in public service loan forgiveness before you found out about the program, let's say you found out today, could you have prior employment qualify towards this program?
Yes, these programs are retroactive. You're still going to have to make 120 payments either way. So if you were working for 20 years in public service and you just found out about this and you hadn't made any payments on your loans, unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to qualify. You need to have made 120 payments. That sort of is the crux of the program. And so again, it is retroactive. Anything from October of 2007 to present is fair game as far as employment goes. But again, you need to have made payments, not, throughout that whole time, but collectively 120 throughout that period, or, in the future going forward.
Great. Well, thank you, Lindsay, for providing your expertise. You get to work with student loan borrowers every single day, and I don't think there's anyone else I would trust with these questions, so I appreciate it.